Right. Hey everyone. So this is how to mix a modern rock song. And today we've got the mix file up for my band's song Can't Stop Me. And I'm going to be going through it and just showing you guys a little bit of how to mix a song. I'm going to go through my process from start to finish. I'm not going to mix the song because, to be honest, I can't remember exactly what I've did, but I'm going to go through pretty much as I possibly can and go over what I do from start to finish, because it's generally the same for every single song. So here we've got the whole entire mix file. And before we get started, first thing I want to say is that this is not like the right way to mix. This isn't the wrong way to mix. Everyone mixes differently. Everyone does their own thing. So you just want to take everything with a grain of salt. Make sure that you get a bit of information from everywhere and mix to what you think sounds good and what actually does sound good. And you learn that over time. You can't get it straight away, but everyone learns after a little while. So first thing I do before I mix, which I'll quickly play a little bit of the song. But this is the song, Can't Stop Me. So as you can hear, it's pretty much already mixed. So we're just going to go through that. But before I get into mixing a song, generally I set up my session as best as I possibly can. So what I like to do, some people, like to, separate the band from all the programming or from all like the effects and stuff. I just simply like to separate everything into the individual components or elements, such as your vocals, your programming, your guitars, bass, the drums, any like weird just kind of effects that aren't really like musical in any way, shape or form, and are more just there to beef up certain sections. And if I had like an orchestra or like, pianos or something, I might have a separate bus for them as well. But pretty much everything's sorted into a bunch of buses, and that allows me to kind of control everything as I'm mixing it, which makes it a lot easier. So once I've set up my session, I generally tend to go through the song. I tend to listen to a song. Generally speaking, there's always a rough mix of it before you get into mixing, so you give that a listen, and you also just have a listen to all the stems that are sitting there and stuff. And the first thing I always try and do is get a feel for what is the most important stuff in the song, a feel for where the song's going, what it's trying to do, and that can change from song to song. Some songs, maybe the guitars are, a prominent instrument. Some songs, maybe the vocals are the prominent thing. In most songs, vocals are normally at the top, but it really depends, and depends on the type of genre you're mixing, depends on a lot of different stuff. But that's generally what I do to start off with. So I listen to every single thing and then kind of get a little bit of a list going for what is the most important and what is the least important. And that is generally what I use to order my mixing in. So for this song, generally speaking, the vocals, the drums, and the bass are the three most important things. They're the three things that are basically going to give this song 90% of the vibe, 90% of what it actually is. And then the guitars, or at least mainly the rhythm guitars, also kind of fit into that. And then all the extra little guitars, effects, programming, and some of the backing vocal stuff, that's all of that. So the way that I like to order it is I have a lead instrument, and that's always at the forefront of the mix. Your main instruments, which are generally pushed up as loud as they possibly can get, without obviously overtaking the lead, and then everything else kind of just fits in around it. So I don't really prioritize getting those in unless, for example, one of the other guys in the band, or if, for example, I've mixed for a client in the past, they request a certain instrument to go up. So once I've ordered my instruments and figure all of that out, I generally get into mixing. So I'll open up all of these stems and get into it. So generally with this song, Can't Stop Me, and with most modern rock, your drums and your bass, your guitars and your vocals are going to be the most important things, especially your major ones. So most of the time I'll start with probably like the drums. Sometimes I'll start with vocals, but I always think it's a good idea to start with the most important instrument because you want that to sound the best and then have everything else fit around that, or at least that's the way I do it. So this time we'll just go into the drums first. So I'll just quickly mute everything and we'll unmute it as we go. Effects, damn it. Cool, get everything muted. And we'll get into the drums. So first up is this. So generally speaking, I generally like to add like samples into my drums and everything. So we'll start off with like just the drum sound originally without samples. So I'll just quickly unmute a couple of things. Kick room. And these drums were done by programming. It's 2021. Not everyone can afford to do drums in a studio. We recorded this in the bedroom, so programming was pretty much our go-to when it came to the sound. I can't remember if that's, I think that's the actual room. So the drum sound that we started off with this was just this, which also when mixing, I always try and find, for example, like a chorus or something to start mixing on first, and try and get the sounds through that because it's generally like the loudest bit of the song. That's all, or the most dense bit of a song. So these are the drums that we started with. And they've got a little bit of mixing on them, so they're not super duper raw, but yeah, so they're not bad. Mind you, there is like a little bit of stuff on them already. I'm not going to bother turning it off because it'll take forever. So generally when it comes to mixing drums, first thing I like to do is just get a good level of where they're all meant to be sitting. So I'll mix, for example, the kick in, I'll mix the snare in, mix all the toms in, and then I'll mix all the cymbals in right after that. And then just kind of balance that around. Obviously, those have to be rebalanced a little bit as you bring everything else in, but it's good just to get going and get something happening because, it's music. Something's meant to be going. Otherwise, it's boring as hell. So I just get that going. And then I try and get the natural, in this case, they're not natural, but natural drums sounding as cool as I can get them to sound. Which this was roughly where I think I managed to get them, and I thought they sounded pretty cool. I think there was also some reverb added and stuff. Yeah, cool. And then once I've done that, I try to add in some of the samples. So generally first I'll add in like a kick and a snare sample. So I'm just gonna do it this way because I actually know what I'm doing with this. So for example, kick sample I've got here is just this like really, really fat low kick. And that blended in with the normal kick just makes it sound really beefy. But obviously when you're blending kicks together, you want to make sure you check your polarities and all of that stuff. Snares, I tend to use like 2 samples at the same time. I've got 2 go-to samples that I kind of use on everything, which generally adds a bit of a, I guess a bit of body to the snare, to me personally. So I always make sure that whatever the raw snare is that we have has like a lot of crack to it, a lot of hit, and then I kind of bring the body back in with a lot of samples. So that's that, and then those all combine. Sounds like that. Pretty crazy. Not really, actually. It's pretty simple. And then yeah, with all the samples, the drums end up sounding like this. So that sounds pretty cool. No, it's not doing anything. We'll just leave it on mute. Cool. So yeah, once I do that, I get all the drums in, get them going. A little trick that I do like to use on snare drums before move on to some of the other stuff is I do always have a specific snare sound that kind of comes in. So I always make like a reverbed snare, and then in things like choruses and stuff, I'll bring the reverb up a little bit just to give the chorus a bit more size, as you can hear. Just a little bit of reverb on like the occasional snare really helps certain parts jump out a fair bit, and just makes, for example, like any flam at the start of like a section, sound really big, like up in here. Just helps it pop out a little bit. So that's something I add in as well for drums. And then the next thing, and this is the most important thing when mixing drums, I think it makes the biggest difference to the sound, is parallel compression. So when mixing drums, obviously you want to preserve as much transient. You want to make it sound as rich as possible, but to get beefy drums, parallel compression is basically the best way to do it. So to be honest, I think this is like 90% of the sound too. So all I do is actually mix in a version of the drums that is just absolutely crushed. Has a lot of pump to it, and yeah, I just mix that in. I mix that in, I think, a little bit louder than the actual drums. Let's have a look. Oh no, it's just below the drums. Yeah, so I just mix that in a little bit above the drums. Yeah, I mix that in a little bit above the drums, and altogether they sound like this. Pretty cool. On top of that too, before moving on to other instruments, I generally also try and do something with the hi-hat, because hi-hats are always really pesky and can sound annoying. So I normally find a section with a hi-hat, and then just try and get a good sound with that as well. So when mixing drums, always go to two sections, get like a chorus with like a lot of cymbals going, and then something with hats going, because that'll help you get a good even mix. Because something that sounds great with like loads of cymbals might sound kind of crap with hats. Yeah, so once you've mixed your drums in, you want to bring in your next instrument, which is, for me, always the bass. I always go straight to the bass next, and bring that in, because it's generally the most important. And with bass, my kind of go-to is I always like to have a lot of layers for the bass, so I can control all of the individual elements of the bass, such as like the high end, the mid range, and all of that stuff. And just, it gives me more control, gives me a better ability to actually shape and control the sound, because sometimes you can get some really annoying things. So some of the stuff that we've got in the bass track is, let's have a look. We'll go here. So you've got, I think, just like a bass amp sound. Cool. So there's a bass amp sound. That's like a low bass of some kind. To be honest, I can't remember what it is. I always try to have a dry bass in my mixes, or just at least in the files, just in case I need to use it for something, or reamp, or maybe the sound just doesn't work. Just I can use like a digital amp or an amp sim or some crap like that and mix it around. Just it always helps. I always find it helps. But that's not being used in this one, thankfully, which means that the bass sound would have worked. Then specifically to this song, I've got like some fuzz, but like generally any kind of distortion can really help bring out the notes a little bit more in the bass and help it kind of glue with the guitar a bit. So I've just got some fuzz. Just some cool stuff. And then the very last thing that I always include in is a sub bass, which just has a strong low end to it that fills in wherever that maybe the acoustic bass, or no acoustic bass, the electric bass isn't. So that's normally just done on a synth or something. And then what I end up doing is I try and mix that in with the drums, and then try and get like a good punchy sound with that. So what that'll sound like is probably this. So yeah, once that's in there, I just kind of try and get all of the different tones in the bass level. I try and get the low end evened out on it. That's a really important thing, is make sure you use compressors and whatnot to even out your low end. Do a bit of EQ work and whatnot. And yeah, that's generally all I do. I don't do too much to the bass. I just try and make sure it sounds good on the way in, which is the biggest thing with recording. Make sure your stems sound good on the way in. Don't wait until mixing to fix everything. So generally speaking, I'll do the same thing. I'll go through a chorus and then I'll go through a section with hi-hats or like a verse section, and just make sure it feels good across those two kinds of sections, like a verse and a chorus. So like the verse up here, yeah, so it sounds pretty cool. So once I've done that, generally speaking, when I'm mixing, I will kind of go in and add some vocals in. Like I'll do a rough mix of the lead vocals, put that in there just so I've got something to mix the guitars and everything around if I haven't mixed the lead vocals first. But for this video, I'm just going to skip the vocals and leave them until the end, just so I can go through them all in one go. So, but generally speaking, you know, I'd just let the lead track go, and that way I can kind of mix the vocals in and get them to a spot where I feel like they're meant to be good, and then I'd mix everything in around it. But just so you guys can hear what's going on with the instruments, I'm just gonna do the instruments first. So once we've done drums, once we've done bass, keep going down the list of important instruments in the song. The last main major instrument, other than the vocals obviously, is the rhythm guitars and some of the clean guitars. So we're going to unmute some of them and have a listen. So generally speaking, with guitars, I prefer to double track guitars and then maybe do like a third track and put it in the middle just for a bit of like beefiness. But simply just double tracking them, panning them left and right, and then just doing a couple of EQ tricks to separate them a little bit. So yeah, I'll play the guitars, see how they sound, and get into it. Cool. So something that's important too when mixing, and this comes in especially when you start doing guitars and stuff, is to constantly flip into mono and see how everything sounds in mono, because pretty much like you can actually get a better gauge for how the volume of an actual instrument or of a element within a mix is actually where it's actually sitting when you've put something in mono versus when it's in stereo. You've got that, you know, stereo separation that allows you to kind of hear it differently. So I find it really handy to like generally mix my guitars and stuff. Like once I get to guitars, I generally just start mixing in mono and try and get everything to sound really dope in mono. And then once I split it to stereo, I do a little bit of EQ work and stuff and try and get them to split up. So each of the individual guitars, I'll just go through them. So we've got, I think we used a pod for this. So this would have been like the tread plate or something. Cool. So generally on one side I've got that, and I think this one is like I think it's like the angle one. So this is the other side guitar. So that's the other side guitar, and in the middle I always try to have like just some disgusting garbage in the middle that generally just beefs it all up. But a trick that I try to use when mixing guitars is to try and find a good place for them EQ wise, but then normally if there's like a notch, I normally notch like up and down a specific spot on one guitar. And then what I do is I get to the other guitar and flip them. So that kind of helps split them up a little bit. Pretty cool little trick, but yeah, I try to do that with most of the guitars. That helps split them up a little bit. So that's the guitars, the rhythms. And then the next thing is any clean guitars that you might chuck in. So we have these clean guitars in like in the pre-choruses. So just solo them quickly. Cool stuff. So they're kind of like these washy sounding guitars, and then we've got these other ones in there just to add a bit of note. So those just add a little bit note definition into that section. So all of them together. Yeah, sound like that. Sound pretty cool. But yeah, so once I've brought in the rhythm guitars and any like major clean guitars that are in, I try and get like a good mix of just that. Which normally too, I also have vocals mixed in as well. So I'm seeing where everything sits in regards with the vocals, but we'll just go with the instrumental for now. So... Cool. So it sounds pretty dope, and like pretty much I'll get it to a point where I feel like everything's sitting well. It's, you know, it's moving and it's jumping a bit. You know, I'll switch between mono and stereo and just try and get that mix sounding as good as possible with just the bare minimum instruments. Once we've done that, obviously I'll probably revisit the vocals. So during my mixing, I always just constantly revisit the vocals, make tweaks, make adjustments. and just try to make sure it's always sounding on top and in the best light. But generally speaking, I will also mix the vocals pretty much entirely first with things. Sometimes, depends. They're always I always revisit them. I don't just mix it and then leave it for the rest of the song. They're always something that I keep hitting, and then by the time it gets to the end of the song, that's when they sound good. So next thing, after we've done that, now that we've done the main instruments, which is underneath the lead instruments, we can get into all the backing, silly stuff, all the fun little things that kind of make, production fun. So we'll start with all the extra little guitars that we chucked into the song. And this is like a really handy thing that you can do in modern rock with production and mixing, is to throw in like additional guitars and additional instruments that can really beef the song up, bring the song to life, and really give it a larger energy, opposed to just being, two guitars, a bass, and a drum kit. So first thing, the biggest thing that I always recommend bringing in whenever you have like a riff or a chorus or something, is a high guitar playing some kind of higher, I wouldn't say a drony melody, but like basically just some kind of like root note over the top of everything, just to fill in that space. So we do it in pretty much every single song, and it's one of my favorite tricks for production. So we've got this little guitar in the main riff and the chorus that goes like this. You get the idea. So pretty much what that does is that, I'll show you. It adds a little bit into it. So I'll just quickly show you with it, and then we'll flip in without it. Actually, I'll show you without it first. So here we go. And I'll bring it in now. And I'll mute it. So you can see it really adds just enough into that chorus to really just make it pop a little bit more, for lack of a better term. It just really helps the sound feel a lot more bigger. So that's something we do in every single chorus, and every single like major section of a song really helps them become bigger. Something that we did specifically in this song was we added these kind of cool little clean guitars in at the beginning of each section to kind of make each section have a bit of an explosive start to it. So I'll show you guys what these ones are. And this is also another trick that you can use to kind of help certain sections feel a lot bigger, or at least the start of them feel bigger, is you can chuck extra stuff at the beginning of them, such as like a big chord, or maybe, like an extra drum, or an explosion sound or something. You can add something into those sections to make them feel a hell of a lot bigger. So these are these like weird little chords that we popped in. I'll just go back to here and see how they sound. So very nice, very cool. So we've got that, and then we have another layer of that just under it, which I think this one's a bit more of a, I think this one's a bit more harsh, has a bit more pick definition to it. Yeah, cool. So they're pretty cool. What they do is they just add a bit of spice to a beginning of a section. Kind of hard to hear them in this, but play it anyway. So you can hear them like a little bit in there, but again, they're just there to add a bit of spice. And then the other thing that we do with guitars, occasionally, if we've got like a rhythm guitar or something that we want a specific sound for, we'll just dump it on a separate track, and that way I can mix it a little bit better, which is something I would recommend doing if you have a specific sound in mind, you're sending it to, or sending your song to another engineer, or if you're mixing, putting things on different tracks can really help you just kind of separate them, help you think about them a little bit more clearly. So we've got this little intro guitar at the start of the song that just sounds like this. Which, with everything, yeah, sounds pretty cool. And then I think we have like a little guitar thing up here, which is like a little guitar break, which I think is just another, yeah, radio effect guitar thing. But that can really help to kind of like just make certain sections feel a bit like bigger. So for example, here with the rhythm guitars, you know, traditionally maybe you would have it as one of the rhythm guitars on the side, but you know, cutting it out, chucking a couple of effects on it, making it just feel a bit different can really help when those rhythm guitars come back in. It can make the section feel a hell of a lot bigger. So once we've done guitars, and we've got the guitars, the drums, the bass, you know, we've got a pretty thick sounding mix. So I'll show you guys just quickly what that sounds like. Actually, we'll go to the breakdown. I'll show you guys what that sounds like. Wrong bit. So yeah, it's sounding pretty thick at this stage. Yeah, so it sounds pretty big. And you could probably stop there with like, you know, most instrumentals, but for us at least, we like to put a little bit of programming and a bit of extra, a little bit extra production work. So generally speaking, you could get away with that for a mix, and you know, most people would probably think it's pretty alright. But you know, we're really big on electronics, so something that we do chuck into music, and mind you, some people will probably think this is absolutely stupid and totally not rock or totally not, you know, like traditional instruments or whatever, but we always love to chuck electronics in, you know, artificial beats and whatnot into songs, just because we find it fun. We find it interesting, and I feel like it adds a little bit to the song and helps it pop a little bit more. So I'm just going to go over some programming elements that we chucked in now. And you know, you could chuck something like this into a modern rock song, maybe to make a certain section feel a little bit bigger. You could add it to make it, you know, add a bit more groove, or maybe you could use, you know, some synths to beef up some guitars, or, you know, you can do anything. Sky's the limit with this sort of stuff. So the first thing that we chucked in that we thought was really cool was this beat, which goes during the chorus of the song. Pretty cool. There's like a variation of it. Yeah, so, you know, got a couple of things in there, like a cowbell, you know, random cymbal thing that's like distorted as crap. You just distorted it. You know, hats. Some random ice thing we found on Fruity Loops. You know, like a kick. Weird snare. Yeah, you know, claps, like, there's plenty of stuff you can throw in. But so what we feel this adds is like a little bit of bounce to the beat. So I'll just quickly play the chorus and I'll bring it in. So this is the chorus normally. It's subtle, but it gives it a bit more, gives it a little bit more of a groove, which we kind of like. The other programming thing that we chucked in the chorus was these vocal chops. So these just kind of So they're just some vocal chops again. They're sort of doing the same job that the higher octavey guitar thing in the chorus is doing. It's sort of just that, filling in that space a little bit more, adding a bit more texture into that. So yeah, that's in there, and that's what we use that for. The next major thing that we do is we have a weird kind of like bell thing following the vocal line. So that's something else we sometimes do, is we do follow vocals with programmed elements that can sometimes help the vocals pop a little bit more, or maybe just make that melody feel a little bit more fuller. So this is one that we've got. We just call it Twinkle for some reason. So it's just this little thing, and it doesn't really do all that much, but it does help enforce the vocal melody a little bit. And then the last thing we've got in this are these saws. So it's kind of like a saw-based synth thing. And what we use these for is just to kind of beef up the guitars, beef up the main riff and stuff during the chorus, just so it felt a little bit bigger than the verses. So we got these higher ones, and then we've got a low one added in. So all of the programming stuff together sounds like this. It's pretty cool. But yeah, so we chucked that behind all of the instruments just to give it a bit more life. And to us, sometimes using those program elements can really help space the chorus out from the verses, make them sound a little bit different. As you can sort of tell, I'll play a bit of a verse. That versus, for example, something like this. So all those extra instruments can really help make a section feel a lot more full. Before we get onto the vocals, the last thing that I tend to do when mixing is I put in a bunch of just kind of default effects sort of things that I just use in every single mix. And these are like things like reverse cymbals or reverse snares or kind of like explosions on certain sections. And all this does is just acts sort of like movie sound effects and stuff, just helps really beef up certain sections. So I'll just unmute all of these quickly, show you what they are. So first up, we've got the biggest one, which is a gunshot, which we find super handy for all of these things. So I'll just quickly solo that. So we just chuck this basically at the beginning of every section that needs a bit more kick to it. And actually just quickly, I'll show you the rest of them first, and then I'll show you what it does. So reverse cymbals, they're cool. Reverse effects, same shit, they're cool. And I shouldn't have swore. I'm gonna bleep that out, probably. No, it doesn't matter. We're not even monetized anyway. Got a tambourine in there. Need a tambourine if you're gonna do a rock song. If you don't, you're not making a rock song. And then we've got like a random whip at some point in the song. Meant to sound like some kind of like Western thing. Just funny as, so just in this bit. Dumb little Western whip. Kind of meant to be a bit of a joke. Should have fun with music when you're making it. Doesn't have to always be serious. But yeah, so what all of these do for a section, for example, I'll play this breakdown section up here and I'll show you what it sounds like without and then with. So this is without. I'll just give it a little bit more. Has a bit of a hit to it, but with all of these extra effects, does a little bit, just helps push the compressors a little bit and makes it sound a little bit chunky. But yeah, so that's that. So once you go a cool instrumental mix, you know, you can move on to adding more vocal stuff in. So we'll get into the vocals now. So first thing is mixing the leads. For the lead vocals, generally speaking, I try to just have it as strong as possible and then try and use as minimal kind of like delay and stuff unless it's like actually meant to be in the song. So I'll just find those, I think those delays are muted. So I also use like a slight distortion underneath the lead vocals always, just to give it just a little bit more strength to it. So we'll just listen to some lead vocals here. So I'll just play this.
Yeah, God, you can stop me now, yeah. God, no, stop me now that I'm free to be what I believe. Yeah, you can stop me now that I'm free to be what I believe. Yeah, well, you can't stop me now.
So generally speaking, try to keep it pretty dry, other than that like distortion and like obviously compression and stuff. And then the next thing that I tend to do is I add some delays and some reverb just in, and that kind of helps make everything sound really, really big. So
yeah, God, you can stop me now, yeah. God, no, stop me now that I'm free to be what I believe. Yeah.
So it's just like these little delays and stuff just to give it a bit more body. So I'll just show you what they sound like. And they're sidechained to the vocals, so they duck out whenever the lead vocal comes in, and then when the lead vocal stops, they kind of like jump up a little bit, and that just kind of helps the lead vocal feel a lot bigger and feel a little bit more full without having to like drown it in like reverb and stuff. So yeah, so that's that. Next thing I do is add doubles to like choruses and stuff. Oh, and screams obviously. There's no screams in the chorus though, but add some doubles in. So like these are probably auto-tuned and sound absolutely garbage, so I apologize in advance, but you know, it'll be cool.
Stop me now that I'm free to be what I believe. Yeah, you can't stop me.
I'm never really fussed on like too much on how they turn out. The main thing is that it just adds a bit more to the vocal. So I never really use them as a major sounding thing. If it's going to be really up there in the front, I'll probably sit down and, you know, get a really, really, really good take for it. But most of the time, you know, if it's just a really small backing element that's just to beef up the sound of the original vocal, which generally with backing vocals, that's what you're doing anyway. you know, I'll just kind of like do a take that's in time with it and auto tune it and just do that. Makes it a little bit quicker. There's, you know, but again, if a vocal take is, you know, a bit more in the front, or maybe you're doing a double as like a really obvious thing, yeah, maybe do some better takes than what I've just done there. And then occasionally I think I have like a third double somewhere.
I'm in a face up between the saints and the sinner, yeah. I pull myself up off my knees.
But yeah, so with everything in there.
Can't stop me now, yeah. Can't no stop me now.
They literally just add, you know, a bit of texture onto the into the stereo spectrum. So that's the next thing. After that, well, I should probably cover the screams. There are some screams every now and again. So with screaming, you know, there's some stuff in the mains. So I'll just quickly mute these.
Stop me! Yeah!
So it's just like a little scream, and then what I do sometimes to beef them up is to chuck like a lower scream under them.
Yeah!
So, you know, all together.
Yeah!
Just sounds way bigger. Yeah, so after that, another major trick when doing vocals is to add some octaves in. Lower octaves and higher octaves can really help a vocal sound big. So in the chorus, we've got this low one, and again, this is like some poorly tuned stuff because I cannot sing down this low naturally.
You can stop me now, yo. Can't no
Sounds so bad.
Me. Now that I'm free to be what I believe. Yeah, you can't stop me.
But that plus the you know, the lead vocals.
You can stop me now, yeah. Can't no stop me. Now that I'm free.
Just adds a bit of body into those high vocals that, you know, sometimes gets, you know, is not there. But generally speaking, you know, you just chuck like a low track. Another thing that you can do on the other end of the spectrum is to throw in some high stuff where there's lower vocals. So for example, in this pre-chorus section where the lead vocals are lower.
And up to the man in the mirror, I see a different side of me.
You can add in some higher vocals to do the exact same effect, but in the opposite direction.
And up to the man in the mirror, I see a different side of me.
So I tend to do it in falsetto just so it sounds like a little bit different to my normal voice. And so that together sounds like this.
And up to the man in the mirror, I see a different side of me.
Sounds pretty cool. So that's that with those vocals. You know, and then sometimes you have like these little effects and stuff that you want to chuck in vocal sections where like maybe, you know, it needs like a weird mix. So I just do those on separate tracks, for example.
Side of me.
So it's just like a, you know, like a low and a high on either side. And that's, yeah, they're pretty cool. What else is there? Oh, harmonies. Yeah, so there's that. And then last couple of things for your vocals. Adding some harmonies in is always fun in the chorus. I should go over some of these things. Holy crap, there are a lot of harmony tracks. So for example, in the chorus.
Yeah, you can. Now that I'm free to be what I believe. Yeah, you can't stop me. Now that I'm free to be what I believe.
So there's some cool stuff you can do with harmonies, and that can really up the production value of your chorus, but it can push it into like super produced pop or mega produced direction. So depending on what kind of rock sound you're going for, but if you're going for modern rock, I think harmonies sound really dope. So everything, all of those together.
Hey, now that I'm free to be what I believe,
It sounds sick. Sounds absolutely cool. And you can just blend those in a little bit on the sides and just really beef in the vocals. Another thing we occasionally have is some like, ahs and woes and stuff like that. So we got this thing in this section up here where these vocals are doing this cool like,
yeah.
cool little thing.
Face off between the saints and the sinner, yeah. I pull myself up off my knees. It's time for you to say, yeah.
Cool little thing. So you can do little tricks like that with vocals to, really, really make a section sound cool. But yeah, that's harmonies. Last thing that you can add, which this is kind of like a cheat. If you can't get like harmonies or you can't get, good doubles or something happening, this is like the easiest way to beef up your vocal tracks, which is by adding some gang vocals. So just things like,
You, God, you can't stop me now. You, God, stop me.
just get a couple of mates in a room, stand around and yell into a microphone and do it in different voices. It'll sound awesome. You only need like 2 or probably about 3 people and you can do gangs. If you change how your voice sounds every single time that you record, it'll sound huge. Or it'll sound like that, maybe. Not the best, but, it'll sound cool. And so all of the vocals together, once they're all there, is this.
Stop me now that I'm free to be what I believe. Yeah, you can't stop me now that I'm free to be what I believe. Yeah, well, you can't stop me now.
Pretty damn cool. So once you got your vocals mixed, go in, do some de-essing, or do what I do and de-ess everything manually, because I'm weird. De-ess, go in and do some automation, get everything sounding good. Maybe bring like your vocals up in certain sections and all of that, and mix everything in together. Big thing I would also recommend is if you have like a last chorus or like a last section of a song, maybe automate the drums up just like a slight bit in those sections. It can, or even just the cymbals or something. It can really help sell the section being a lot bigger. But once you've done all of that, you have a full song. Oh, actually, lastly, on the mix bus, I should have said this at the start, but I generally tend to mix with a little bit of compression and a limiter on my mix bus, just so I can hear how it's meant to sound, after it's been through everything, because there's no point mixing with no limiter or anything. And yeah, once you've got that, you've got yourself a mix, do a bit of parallel compression, and it should sound like this, which I'll just play. Let's see, I'll play from the second verse. It'll be cool.
The storm is gone, and I will carry on. This is my life, this is my voice, this is my song. And now the table's turned, yeah. Will you ever learn? In the end, you play with fire, you will get burned. So stand up to the man in the mirror. See a different side of me. Face up between the saints and the sinners.
So sounds pretty cool. I would show you guys the EQ settings or whatnot, but to be totally honest with you, I really don't feel like it's gonna help with your individual mixes. Every song's different, so there's no point in me sharing some of that stuff because what works for one song won't work for another. But yeah, so that's generally how I mix the song. I try to mix with a lot of layers and stuff, and I also do try and separate everything up a little bit. But yeah, the biggest part of mixing rock and mixing any song, I feel, is trying to make sure you prioritize certain instruments. So once you've mixed everything together, figure out what the lead instrument is like throughout the whole song, or if you're even able to do it, figure out what the lead instrument is in each section. As you can see up here, I've kind of got them all labeled, and you can kind of adjust your mix, automate your mix a little bit from section to section. But yeah, figure out what your main instruments are, figure out what can be pushed into the back, figure out what really makes that section special, and focus on those things. Focus on getting those mixed first, because that's going to do 90% of your mix for you. Everything else is just going to add a little bit of texture and a little bit of flavor. Yeah, I think that that's the most important thing when it comes to mixing, is just making sure you learn to prioritize instruments and not just trying to turn everything all up in one go and just totally screwing the mix up. Yeah, make sure you get the fundamentals right first, and then mess around with all the smaller things. Don't worry about the smaller things at the start, because it can be really tempting, when you hear like a cool synth or a cool this, to just throw that up and try and mix around that, and it can totally screw your mix up. But yeah, so that's how to mix some modern rock. If you guys have any questions at all, feel free to chuck them in the comments. Happy to answer them. Don't normally do mix tutorials or mix run throughs or something, so this one might have been a little bit all over the shop, but hopefully I'll get better at it as time goes on. Anyway, thanks for watching. The link to the full song of Can't Stop Me is going to be in the description, so if you got the time, I'd really appreciate if you could click it, check it out, let me know what you think of the mix, let me know what you think of the song, and yeah, don't forget to like and subscribe, hit the notification bell, or whatever the hell people on YouTube say these days. But yeah, anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.